Chuck had to cancel, unfortunately, but he has brought to us a fantastic replacement, Seth Duncan, who's the head of analytics of W2O Group, and you will not be disappointed in what he's going to share with you today. Also, let me introduce Katie Eichhoff, who has helped put together this webinar. She is a senior analyst from Karma and also social media manager. And the two of us will be trying to moderate your questions and keep the discussion going. A little bit about Seth. Seth has led research and analytics teams for over 10 years in both academic and business settings. Since 2007, he has focused on using digital and social media data to provide marketing and communications insights and strategy to big clients like Warner Brothers, General Mills, Procter & Gamble, IBM, HP, Medtronic, Genentech, Amgen, and Abbott. As the analytics leads, he has developed methodologies that integrate social, digital, market research, and financial data and deliver tangible business value. His work has been featured in all our industry associations, and he has definitely been highly respected for a lot of his publications. His past, he used to be Director of Research and Development at Beyond Analytics. And let's see, what else to mention is interesting. Seth describes himself as a PhD dropout, but he does have a BA in psychology from Reed College and an MS in psychophysiology at San Francisco State. And he's going to be giving us some real hands-on, interesting applicational data. Showing us how to kind of mix social media and other types of data and to listen carefully to what he terms small data, which can be more powerful even than big data. So with that, rambling as I am here, I should mention I'm plugging in from Dubai today, so it's 11 o'clock here p.m., so bear with me. Seth, let me turn it over to you.
Great. So I'm Seth Duncan. It's glad to be here today, and thanks for the really nice introduction. I'm going to be talking about the emergence of a sort of a discipline that we call social intelligence today, and how a really broad variety of marketing and advertising and communications professionals are leveraging social data to not just sort of, optimize their Twitter performance or figure out how to best spend advertising on Facebook, but really to kind of rethink their approach to market research. And a big part of this that I'm going to get to towards the end of the presentation is how important it is to not really focus on huge data sets, but really to focus your social listening and social analytics, media analytics programs on highly targeted, highly specific audiences online. So, I'm just really quickly going to touch on three kind of big points today. So first, I'm just going to talk about how social data is actually disrupting market research for a lot of the clients that I work with, making it a lot faster than it used to be. And I want to talk about how that's kind of impacted the way that comms and marketing professionals are using social media data and tools, really kind of moving away from social listening and kind of customer service to really broad social intelligence programs that are informing huge parts of client businesses. And then finally, I'm just going to talk about sort of what the practical implications are for analysts, both on the agency and the client side, in terms of the kind of tools that they use and the way that they're actually approaching some of the questions that as professionals we're faced with every day. So I'm just going to start off with a bit of a quote that I think really highlights some of the benefits of social data and social listening nowadays. So I don't know how many of you, this is obviously David Ogilvy was an advertising man, but this I think this quote applies equally well to marketing and communications. But I don't know if many of you have had the chance to read Ogilvy on advertising. It's a fantastic read, and a lot of what he talks about applies as well today as it did, 30, 40 years ago. and or 40, 50 years ago. And the one of the first chapters I'm on advertising is actually talking about all the different roles of specialists and sort of workers within an ad agency. And he's talking about the creative team and how great they are and the kind of background you need to become a creative professional, or how great copywriters are and sort of what they do, and account folks and strategists and so on. And then he gets to the research team, and it's the one part of the agency where he has, I don't want to say he doesn't respect them, because David Ogilvy actually was a pollster before he was an ad guy, but he just basically talks about how they're constantly letting him down. It takes them way too long to actually address questions. He's really frustrated that by the time that he gets the insights and the research back from that team, his campaign's already underway. That at an agency, you can't wait 6 months or a year to start moving on a campaign. So basically, and I think for those of you that work in an agency, you kind of know this is a dirty secret of agency life, that often research and a campaign or research and the client work will start at the same time. And if the research supports what the campaign is, you kind of present it to the client like, oh, hey, this was really strategic and planned out, and we had this insight and so on. But if it doesn't work out, it doesn't actually match what the campaign is, you just kind of toss it out. It's just essentially waste in research. And that's really, I don't want to say it's always been the case, but that happens a lot more than I think people want to admit. And I think that, through like traditional market research methods, whether that's kind of looking at panel-based research and surveys, focus groups, field studies, et cetera, it really does, those are very slow processes a lot of the time. And social data, just with the amount of data that's available and the number of people online, as I'll discuss here in a second, with all this data that's available to us, we can actually answer a lot of the questions that those traditional types of market research are addressing, but in a much faster and often much cheaper way. And again, there's some imperfection in social data, but directionally, often the results are very similar. So just really quickly on why social data is changing the way that we're doing market research. So as I said, I'm actually finding that a lot of clients are actually, in consumer insights teams and the actual market research groups for large enterprise companies, are starting to treat social data, are starting to investigate social data as a possible augmentation, or in some cases, replacement for traditional market research. And there are some of the reasons why that's becoming more of a sort of a feasible or tangible idea to them. Well, first of all, a huge proportion of the world's on social media now. So back in 2007, 2008, or 2009, this argument that, okay, well, there's only a small number of people that are on Twitter and Facebook. They're kind of an odd group. They're not very representative of the population. That was totally true. But now, in North America, for example, 52% of Americans are actively using social media, on a weekly basis. And you really see across the globe. I mean, even if not everybody in Africa is on social media, still a huge proportion of at least middle-class folks across the globe are actually using these. And they're on mobile, too. The other key thing is that oops. Sorry, can you guys still see my screen? Yes. Okay. It says I'm getting a funny move this window away from the shared application. It is pausing screen sharing. You guys are okay? Can you guys see this?
Yeah, I mean, I can.
Okay.
Yes, I can see it as well.
Okay, so I'm just going to ignore the screen.
Yeah.
So the other key thing is that there used to be this argument that you can't really get that there's all these sort of biases in social data. It's really for young people, for people in urban areas, and so on. And that's really not true anymore. I mean, again, very true back in 2008, but now in 2014, it's just not the case. You actually see that social media has been adopted by pretty much every age range, and there's a lot more equity than people believe in terms of sort of the gender breakdown, race and ethnicity, educational level, as well as like important sort of demographic factors like household income, urbanity. If you actually look at Pew Research has a great tracking study that comes out on a quarterly basis looking at the adoption of different social networks across different demographic types, and you find, for the most part, there's very minimal differences across all these different demographic segments. So, you can actually use social data to investigate the way that elderly people are talking about politics, or sort of like rural teens are talking about sneakers or that kind of thing. The other key thing is that, and this is really important when you're actually trying to replace traditional market research and get the rich insights you do through field research and focus groups with social data, the key thing here is that people are sharing everything online, meaning that they're not just saying things like, where did I find this coupon, or just sharing news. They're actually sharing very personal experiences. Across the globe, we're seeing about a quarter of people actually will report that they share almost everything online. In the United States, it's a little bit lower than that, about 15%. but still, if you think about 15% of social media users sharing everything they have, it's still a huge set of data to work with. This is just a case in point. This is a funny example. This is for a client that I was working with a couple of years ago. They had a take-home stool sample test to take in advance of a colonoscopy. The client was like, we were like, okay, we're actually going to use social media to actually kind of treat it as a focus group and get some insights into sort of what people's experiences are of getting a colonoscopy, what they like, and what are the worst parts of the experience for them. And the clients were like, there's no way you're going to find people talking about their colonoscopies. We're like, well, just you wait. And we actually found something like 20,000 unique individuals had shared colonoscopy experiences on just Twitter and Facebook alone. And you can see the stuff that they're saying. They're not just saying things like, oh, I'm freaked out about my colonoscopy. Like, they're actually sharing really rich stuff. And like, this woman is actually saying that she's talking about her doctor and how great he was. She's actually talking about that the drink that they had, sort of ingest ahead of time wasn't as bad as they expected. And you get this really, really rich stuff. And so you're not just kind of seeing the typical kind of brand love, customer service type information that people always associate with social media. You really are seeing these kind of, people sharing very personal experiences that can be very valuable from a market research perspective.
Excuse me, this is Andy. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. I think you probably meant to change your slide forward on that last point. We're still seeing that the 27% of the world population uses social media.
Oh, okay. So the screen share. Okay, so that, yeah, there's a couple of slides here. I'm sorry. There's some let me see.
Okay.
Okay. Can you guys see it now?
Okay. Yeah, okay. I can see.
Can you guys see this slide? This is a slide I meant to be sharing about the woman talking about her colonoscopy. Sorry about that. And there were some other slides in here about people indicating they share everything, as well as some demographic information. But yeah, really sorry about that. That was odd. I'm not sure why that happened. The other key thing, if you actually, I'm sure some of you are familiar with this rule, this sort of rule of thumb that people use to describe conversations online, this 1-9-90 rule, where basically, and it's something that we've seen in our research here, that about 1% of people around any given topic are actually producing content. 9% are essentially sharing it and syndicating it, maybe repackaging it and sharing it out to their networks. And 90% of consumers or people online are really just kind of lurking and learning. They're essentially consuming the content, although they're not really actively engaged in the conversation. And again, for especially large consumer brands, or anytime you're working with a consumer-focused audience, that can be a bit of an issue if you're actually trying to get some insights about sort of what people, sort of their perceptions around products or topics. But the other nice thing about social data is that you don't just have to look at what people say. You can actually look at what they like or what their interests are. You can make inferences based on their behavior. So again, this is just some quick statistics showing it. How many pages, meaning could be musicians or companies or brands that people like on Facebook. This is a recent Social Baker study, and people in the United States at least like on average about 70 things. And so you can kind of look at sort of those clusters and how those relate to each other, and start to make inferences not just about what people are saying, because often people aren't talking online, but you can kind of get a sense of what their interests are and what their passions are by looking at what they actually follow, which is really valuable stuff. The other final point I'll make on why social media is becoming an effective augmentation, or some cases a quick replacement for traditional market research methods, is that, and this is actually one of the things that actually makes, I think, social media more advantageous than using surveys, is that you are actually sampling your audience at the point of experience. Usually when somebody posts online, it's within a day or 24 hours of when they're actually having experience. So this is just an example of looking at, this is for a consumer tech company, looking at the different stages of the sort of the purchase decision cycle. And with social media, you can actually go in and find groups and see, what are they actually doing online, like what kind of content are they consuming, and what are their considerations when they're comparing different models of a product, or when they're gathering information on sort of price, or when they're actually kind of in the post-purchase validation and sort of evaluation stage. And with surveys, you really can't get that, largely because there's this inherent bias in our memory. This is sort of the classic serial position curve for those of you that actually took a experimental psychology course or a cognitive psych course in college. But basically, people are really good at remembering things that they rehearse and repeat over and over again. So, I mean, obviously, like major events in our lives we remember very well because we think about them often. And then also people remember things that just happen to them. So you can probably remember what you had for breakfast or lunch today, depending on what time zone you're in. But people are very bad at remembering most stuff that they're not rehearsing and didn't just happen. So if I were to ask you, like, what did you have for lunch last Wednesday, the vast majority of you wouldn't be able to accurately recall what you actually had for lunch. And that's why surveys are often very poor. If you were to ask somebody, well, tell me about your purchase experience for your car that happened 2 or 3 years ago, there's going to be a lot of inaccuracies, I suppose, in the recollection of that, and a lot of biases in the memory. So again, another really great part of great sort of reason to use social media to sort of augment or replace traditional market research. Another thing I wanted to point out is that I just wanted to show like an actual example just to kind of bring this to life a little bit. And this is a great example of actually using social data to sort of supplement traditional market research methods. This is a case study that we often share that it's for a Gallo wine brand called Bella Sera. About 3 years ago, they were going through a little bit of a crisis where they were losing market share to one of their main Pinot Grigio competitors. So Bella Sera is essentially the lead varietal Pinot Grigio. And they were doing traditional market research. They were essentially surveying a panel on a quarterly basis. They had data going back years and years. And what they were seeing was that the preference for Bella Sera was declining compared to the main competitor, not really around sort of like external characteristics, things like the taste of the wine or the price of the wine or the way, the color of it and so on. But they were really starting to fall behind in terms of sort of personal relevance things, like this is a wine for people like me, or they were endorsing things like this is a wine that I would share with family and friends and so on. So we looked at their marketing materials. It was really clear that they had just kind of shifted to, they'd hired Giada De Laurentiis to actually be the spokesperson for the brand, and they were very focused on Italy and kind of special, sort of like, I don't know, it was very kind of I don't know, for the lack of a better phrase, hoity-toity. They were the ad spots. Giada was saying, she was using pronunciations like, Pinot Grigio, and she was talking about its floral scents and everything. And so we actually replicated these findings in social. We actually went out and just surveyed just organic conversations about these wines, and we actually confirmed that, yeah, online people are saying the same things that we're seeing in traditional market research, that they aren't saying things like, I would share Bella Sera with my friends, it's a wine for people like me, but they were saying, like, it's good value and so on. Then we looked at the people. We actually looked at the demographics of the people online that were saying these things. What we generally found is that the people that were talking about these things, if you looked at their Facebook likes, the kind of handles they followed on Twitter, they weren't following like sort of like magazines like Bon Appetit or sort of like some of the more kind of fancy Food Network stars. They were following things like Walmart, Jiffy Pop, instant coffee. And it became very clear that the audience that they were trying to market to was probably being turned off by these types of advertisements. That it was actually kind of making this wine seem like something that really wasn't for people like them that are essentially casual wine drinkers that might be buying their wine at Safeway or at even a gas station for that matter. So again, a really nice way. And again, we were able to do this research in a matter of a couple of weeks as opposed to 6 months. So it's, again, a nice way where you can kind of take traditional market research methods, merge it with social, and get these really, really fast insights that are very impactful. So that kind of brings me to the next topic I wanted to talk about, which is the evolution of social analytics. Because, as social media networks have really matured, and the kind of data that we can actually collect and analyze from these have matured, I would say that the way that companies are using this data is maturing equally quickly. And I would say just kind of going through these phases, early on, 2007, 2008, maybe some of you recognize these screen grabs. These are from Radian 6, now Salesforce Marketing Cloud. The first phase was really around social listening. So I would say that there was a lot of what I would call anxiety abatement reports. People were kind of alarmed at the volume of conversation they were seeing about their products and their brands and their company online. So a lot of PR and marketing agencies kind of took the lead on providing the analytics around these conversations. And generally what you found is that, the agency would put in some keywords into a tool like Radian 6 or maybe even before Radian 6, something like Ice Rocket, and they would, provide pie charts looking at sort of, where's the conversation happening, what's the wine chart, what the volume over time looks like, and, call out some spikes and some peaks. And usually, the insight in the report is that, yeah, people are talking about you, but they're just sharing news, or people are talking about you, but they're not, but it's pretty positive, or it looks just like what you're seeing in traditional media, no big deal. That's why I call them, anxiety abatement reports. It was basically our client's way of telling their bosses, yeah, we're listening, there's nothing going on that we should be freaked out about. I mean, obviously there's exceptions to that rule, but in general, that was sort of the insights. The next phase, which happened very quickly, is that companies start to actually leverage these conversations and actually kind of start to treat social media as a kind of a customer service space. So this is when you started to see these command centers being built. So they would actually have full-time staff constantly monitoring social media tools in-house, or monitoring social media conversations in-house. They're actually reaching out directly to them, so customer care, customer service is actually using Twitter, and then in some cases Facebook to engage directly with clients. So sort of when companies like Buddy Media and started to sort of come on the scene, sort of proto versions of Sprinkler started to appear. CIOs and certainly COOs were definitely a big part of these conversations. They kind of started to be, social media started to be seen as much of an information technology sort of tool as much as a communications one. And then also social media marketing became optimized through a lot of these tools where you can actually push out content and optimize your content by time of day and audience and so on, using, again, tools like Sprinkler, Spreadfast, Buddy Media, et cetera. More recently, and this is, again, fairly recent, there was sort of this next phase what we call sort of like the social voice of customer. So the social data started to become like operationalized beyond the marketing and comms organization. So again, what you started to see here was sort of like smart dashboards where the KPIs were essentially developed. We kind of knew that there were certain things like for better or for worse, things like impressions, share of voice, specific types of brand sentiment were being analyzed in a highly efficient way. You could actually kind of correlate some of these KPIs to marketing goals. So you started to see big brands like the P&Gs of the world include social in the marketing mix models and actually demonstrate that it had some value above and beyond other kind of marketing and comms means and so on. And then you started to see very kind of early phases of companies listening selectively to their core audiences. So, for example, for like Red Bull, they're just listening to, people that are really into like hip hop and skateboarding and extreme sports and that kind of thing. It was starting to get kind of a little bit small data, if you will. And then I think right now we're really emerging into this fourth phase, which I call social intelligence. So now if you actually kind of, you can go into like the job search boards and actually search for social analytics, and it's a job title now. It's like this real thing that companies hire for. And it's also kind of broken out of marketing and comms and actually has become a core part of consumer insights teams, these market research teams that, often, have, huge budgets to do kind of market research and do really strategic work within the business that touches everything from marketing and comms, but also R&D. And I think the key thing here, like I said, is that the social data is seen as really valuable, not necessarily because it's always telling clients and companies things that are new to them or things that they don't know, but it's just so much faster and cheaper. Like you can actually take social data and come to the same conclusions that you would get from traditional market research in a matter of days or weeks as opposed to like 6 months. And the cost is also much lower. If you want to kind of get a sense of what, sort of affluent people in San Francisco that are into green technology think of solar panels, you can answer that in social in a matter of days for, maybe at most, it's thousands or tens of thousands of dollars instead of 6 months and, hundreds of thousands of dollars, which a lot of companies will actually spend. So highly efficient, much cheaper. And a big part of that's making this actually happen is not just the adoption of social media, but also the advanced statistics that's being applied. So I think another part of this phase is that you're seeing this maturity in how the data is being analyzed. So in the past, you would just kind of pull all the content from a specific audience, kind of look at things like sentiment messages, topics being discussed, and that was great. It was very cross-sectional, though. And now what you're seeing is that the consumer insights and the traditional market researchers are starting to kind of apply their kind of methodological rigor to social data. So you're seeing things like, age match control groups in these studies. You're starting to see, advanced statistics are being used to actually connect some of this data to business metrics and business outcomes in a more meaningful way. You're actually starting to see this data used for forecasts. So, I have a client that at least I've seen the data and it seems pretty reasonable, but they're able to actually forecast trends like the kale chip phenomenon using social data. And so it's really powerful stuff. But again, it's not just counting. You actually have to use some advanced statistics to do this. So, oops, I just see I paused my screen once again. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what I'm hitting to actually do that, so I apologize. So I also really quickly want to talk a little bit about the importance of small data in social intelligence. I mean, there clearly, hopefully everybody is in agreement that there's a lot of value to be gleaned from social data for a wide variety of use cases. But again, I think one of the big risks in kind of employing social data at an enterprise level to address big market research questions and marketing and comms questions is that people kind of look at everything under the sun in social, and that can it can be a real disastrous route to go down, because the data you get when you go directly to like a data sift or even a NetBase or Radian 6, it's really messy. When we've done analyses for every clients from healthcare to CPG to consumer tech to enterprise tech, we always find that over 50% of the posts that we find are irrelevant in social. And by irrelevant, I mean that meaning that they're not voice of the customer. That you're not going to get market research like insights from them. So the content can range from press releases, just being kind of shared through bots or through companies. A lot of black hat SEO. So a lot of links from social networks directly to sites that are just link farms that are essentially trying to like drive up Google rankings for things like illegal online pharmacies and so on. There's a lot of promotions being shared, so people literally just a lot of again bots just kind of sharing promotions that are appearing online. A lot of industry news too, so people are just sharing links to news stories as opposed to actually sharing their opinions and their experiences. And then also a lot of colorful jokes. Give you an example. Pretty much any CPG brand you're going to see that, but this kind of stuff. But we were doing some work for Smart Water a couple of years ago, and it was a real challenge to find any insights around what the customer, what the audience really looked like for Smart Water, because something like 95% of posts about Smart Water were jokes. People saying things like, you're dumb, you need Smart Water, or I'm not going to, there was a lot of college students that were saying things like, I don't need to study for my exam, I'm just going to drink Smart Water and that kind of thing. And again, yeah, it's funny, but no indication that these people actually drink this stuff or that, that they have any relationship whatsoever to Smart Water, other than that they're aware of it and it kind of fits in nicely to their humor. This is some other data that we've seen. And also demonstrates the very low probability of actually finding really interesting stuff in social media. So first, this is from I don't remember the tool exactly, but this is a process that we actually go through now for the content that we're analyzing here at W2O. We crowdsource this, and what we do is we'll pull the we'll go to DataSift or some company like that, or maybe even the social media network API, download all content on a brand, say like Hitachi or something like that, and we will ask two questions. So first of all, does it appear that a human actually posted this? Like, does it make sense? Is there a picture of the person? Is it not a brand, or is it spam or something like that? So we generally find, on average, that about 58% of the content we pull, we just put in a brand name, is actually human-generated. And then the next key thing is that, is it actually written by a consumer, like an actual stakeholder? In this case, it would be like a purchase decision maker, somebody that actually is likely to buy the product. And again, for CPG, this could be a lot higher. But the answer to that, certainly for, I believe this is actually CPG, is that it's about half are actually consumer generated, and the rest are essentially kind of like journalists, marketers, the brands themselves, et cetera. So already you're kind of, when you put in a brand name, right off the bat, about 30% of the content at most is actually written by somebody that might actually, is actually an end consumer. And then once you get into that content, obviously there's the issues where, it could just be humor, people are just sharing brand love, but not actually sharing anything meaningful. So if you kind of like take this approach, you kind of go at the top of the funnel and you look at all conversations about a topic or a brand, there's a lot of work that's involved in actually getting to the people that are having the conversations and doing the stuff that you want to analyze and actually kind of get some insights from. So that's why we really find it's best to actually just start with the core audience in the first place. So rather than kind of going to a social listening tool, put in the keywords, what we found and what our clients found to be really effective is just create these custom search engines of known audiences. So there's it could be for CPG, for example, you might think you might only care about what moms are saying. So you would actually use a set of tools and a set of methods to actually go out and identify moms in specific regions, scrape all of their content over some period of time, and just analyze that. There's other kind of like out-of-the-box types of databases that our clients use. Like we have some clients in the corporate communications just are constantly monitoring what the members of Congress and their staffers are saying online. So they just have this data set of those folks. Enterprise tech, they might care about IT decision makers. Certainly consumer tech, CPG type brands, and entertainment companies might only care about what millennials are saying. And we actually have a large data set of physicians, for example, that a lot of our healthcare clients will use. So again, when you start there, you actually are able to get really, really deep insights really quickly without all the sort of data cleaning and time and effort it takes to actually get to the right stuff in the first place. I wanted to give a quick example using a client that actually likes to. This is all publicly available stuff. We've presented this at a few conferences. This is some information from Warner Brothers. So we've been doing these research studies for a while with Warner Brothers. They directly with their research team. Our client there is the VP of Global Research for Home Entertainment at Warner Brothers, Laura Gross. And for a while, they were having a challenging time kind of convincing their execs that social media was really important to, to sales. And so we essentially did the traditional kind of marketing mix methodology, showing that indeed social media does have an impact on sales above and beyond kind of traditional marketing and advertising spend, which was great in and of itself. But one of the really interesting things that we actually found was that the conversations that mattered most to sort of driving sales weren't sort of overall volumetric stuff. Like if you were to kind of correlate the overall number of tweets with sales, there's some correlation there, but the stronger correlation was between the number of superfans that are talking about a film and sales. So we kind of, we defined superfans as people that actually talked about the film cross channels more than 3 times within a week. So if somebody's doing that, it's usually very indicative that they're really, really into this film or this franchise. And so what we ended up doing as a result is completely transforming the way that they did social listening. For a long time, they've been trying to analyze every single social media post for each of their films, which, for a film like, you kind of get into like the Hobbit franchise or something like that, or some of the other studios' films like The Hunger Games, you're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of posts to analyze. And when we discovered that really the only people that matter are these super fans, these sort of like advocates and in some cases detractors for the films, we were able to like come up with these highly segmented, highly focused listening programs so that we're just listening to the voice of the people that we know matter, so that we're coming up with content that matters to these people. We're able to actually share promotions with these people that we know that matter and so on. That's an example of one super fan tribe that we found for one of their franchises that's called Indoor Punks. We do is when we identify these super fans, we'll scrape all their social interests and do these cluster analyses to kind of see like what are they actually into more so than the general audience. And this is a funny one. It's essentially kind of like, white males, usually in their 20s, that are really into kind of like punk rock music and skateboarding, but they don't ever seem to leave the house because they kind of seem to spend most of their day like watching like, YouTube and playing video games. It's really funny, but they definitely have a huge impact on the way that some of these films are actually perceived online, and they really do drive the conversation. So, again, instead of listening to millions upon millions of tweets and Facebook posts and blog posts about one of these franchises, we were able to actually say, there's really only 10,000 people that matter, 18% of which are these indoor punks that we like to talk about. But yeah, it's just, again, highly targeted, highly actionable, and kind of insights from sort of like small data listening that we can demonstrate over and over again does have some sort of business value. So I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions and so on at the end, so I'll just kind of wrap up here. So just a couple of things I want to sort of like point out that if I didn't touch upon, I want to kind of leave you certainly thinking. So one of the things that I talked about early on was that social media has grown. It's sort of had this global adoption across all segments of the population globally. And one of the key things to remember is that everybody's represented in social media, but it doesn't mean that social media is representative. So I really want to highlight the importance of using control groups, making sure that when you're looking at Twitter conversations that you're trying to remove as much bias from that as a tool as possible. I mean, we all know Twitter does over-index among teens within the United States. It over-indexes in urban areas. So when you're using Twitter as a market research tool, always keep that in mind and make sure that you're using the right control groups. So, you're actually thinking in a disciplined way, so that when you, not only your client, but if somebody from the consumer insights team on the client side looks at the data, they're not instantly going to start poking holes in it and so on and say like, well, what you found is just an artifact of the method you used. Then I think the others is that social analytics has clearly matured. Now a lot of companies are really expecting a high amount of methodological rigor. Like I discussed, we've seen early on when we were presenting social data at W2O to our clients, nobody asked where the data came from. Nobody really asked what the methods, the statistics were used to actually, come up with those insights. But now I would say more often than not, we're working directly with the consumer insights and market research teams, and there's statisticians involved, and they want to know that we're using control groups and that we're not presenting findings that they're making big decisions on that have these methodological flaws. So really key that you're applying the same methodological rigor to social analysis that you would to traditional media analysis, to survey research, et cetera. And then finally, and I hope this is obvious, is that you don't need to analyze everything under the sun. It's really hard to come up with actionable insights if you listen to all conversations around your brand or your product or some sort of topic. If you focus your listening on the right audiences, it's almost impossible not to get insights. It's really, I can't stress it enough, like insights just kind of fall on your lap if you're actually listening to the right audience at the right time. And it doesn't need to be consumer audiences or demographics. It really can be, it could be, investor audiences. It could be audiences of executives, purchase decision makers. But when you do that, it's incredibly helpful. So I can't stress the importance of that enough. So anyway, so I'll stop. I'll stop rambling about how excited I am about social data. For a second, wanted to thank everybody for their time, and I guess we'll open it up for questions.
Seth, thank you so much. Great stuff. Let me invite those of you in the audience to submit your questions now. Meanwhile, I'll start. And big question to me is where do you get those lists that you are showing? Selective listening, moms of teenagers, millennials. Is there some place that sells these lists, or are you talking, or how can you direct us to pull our own?
Yeah, I think you can probably pull your own. So for members of Congress, I'll actually just go through these. I think this is a pretty diverse group here. So for members of Congress, you can actually you can pretty readily go and find all the at the federal level. You can do this at the state level possibly too, but at the federal level it's just desk research. You just go and find the Twitter handles that are associated with all the Congress and folks and the senators, and then you can also usually look at you can go to the list of handles that they follow, and you can find staffers. People will self-report being a staffer for that congressperson. So you kind of can create, often the staffers are the ones that are saying the more provocative stuff. The actual Congress handles are usually pretty, they're, I don't want to say that they're vanilla, but they're, they're not the most exciting to listen to. It's really the staffers that have the interesting things to say. You can get some really deep insights that way. With superfans of these could just be like marketing advocates. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. For Warner Brothers, the example I gave, we're really defining them as people that talk about the film or the TV show multiple times over a specified period of time. So for that, it's really, you can use any social listening tool like a Radian 6 or a NetBase or a Crimson Hexagon to collect that. You just put in the search title. You basically look for duplicates and the output from that. In other cases, sometimes brands, if you're really focused on social marketing per se, there's plenty of, you can probably download all the content from your Facebook page, for example, and look at people that engage with your content on a regular basis, maybe to find them as super fans. Moms of teenagers, that's a tricky one. There's when we're creating these, there's kind of a two-step process. We'll actually go in and find people that are saying things like my son, my daughter, my kid. They'll talk about, they might even be talking about dropping their kids off at high school, parent-teachers conferences. It's really very conversational. Then the next step is to, we actually crowdsource this. So we'll pull all the images from this audience, essentially, and it could be hundreds of thousands of pictures. And we crowdsource. We actually go to Amazon's Mechanical Turk, and we have the crowd say, yes, this person actually is a mom, or they're female, one, and they are of an age range where it's believable that they actually have a teenager. So we might actually specify an age range. There's no one way. That's the thing. There's a bit of an art, to all these. IT decision makers. This is an easy one. It's basically we have, developers. Well, actually, in some cases, for some B2B tech clients, you can go to their CRM database, and they will provide you a list of email addresses for their customers and prospects, and then you can essentially use those email addresses to go and find their social properties. Usually, that's you kind of have to do that within the client's firewall, since that's very proprietary data. So if you have that kind of relationship with the IT department on the client side, that will work. In other cases, what you can do is you can just get a list of the companies that are their customers and their prospects, and literally just search LinkedIn for people that have job titles like, IT director, CIO, maybe CTO of those companies and prospects, and find those folks. And then, LinkedIn, you can't get conversational data, but you can kind of verify that these people exist, and then kind of go to, Twitter, Facebook, maybe they have blogs and so on, and just find their content that way. Millennials is kind of like the moms of teenagers one. Basically, just take large random samples of people online. If they're not self-reporting their age, then just crowdsource it. Have the crowd say, yep, this person looks like they're between, 18 and 30 or whatever. So yeah, a lot of different methods. And then once you do that, you can, most of the data, you can use a combination of RSS feeds and direct access to like the social media APIs to scrape their content. You can also create filters in a lot of the social listening tools. Like I know, NetBase, Radian 6, and Systemos all allow you to kind of create these filters where you can say, okay, I'm going to create a listening profile and only want to include these handles and these blog posts, et cetera. So, yeah. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work up front, but it ends up really paying off in the long run.
Seth, this is Katie. We've got a couple questions from the audience. One of them was, what are some social intelligence tools that you recommend we use? But I think you went through a couple options for those.
Yeah. So I would say, with the kind of like creating these custom panels is really difficult. So yeah, I would say you can kind of use a lot of social listening tools to at least create these panels. One of the sort of tools that I really like to use that's embedded in one of these social listening platforms is actually for Systemos. It's really hard to find, but there's a section, if you go to the social media tab in Systemos map and you scroll down to, I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since I've done this. Unfortunately, my team does a lot of this along with me, but if you scroll down, there'll be like a little search tab that says something like Twitter bio search, and that actually allows you to search the bios on Twitter. So this is a really quick and dirty way to create these panels. So if you want to just find CIOs, just put CIO there, and it'll literally search all of Twitter for people that have the word CIO in their handle. If you wanted to find moms, you could do the same thing, people that say that they're a mom or mother, and you can basically just get all those handles, and you can probably work with your sales rep or whoever your rep is at Systemos, or even another listening tool, and they can kind of set up a custom profile for you that's just monitoring those tweets from those handles. So again, kind of a quick and dirty way to do that. But I would say, like, overall, like a good social listening program, you're going to need access to some social listening tool, some enterprise level social listening tool. I really like crowdsourcing a lot of the data cleaning. I feel like it's just a lot more sophisticated than what you can get with NLP, and a lot of image recognition software that's still pretty wonky. So I would say social listening tool, Amazon's Mechanical Turk, and something like SPSS and R. If you have those three things, like a stats program, some crowdsourcing content, and a social listening tool, I mean, that's definitely like a MacGyver way to go about it. But it's a pretty cost-effective way to kind of develop one of these systems, so or programs.
So to clarify, Mechanical Turk is a crowdsourcing tool?
Yeah, so basically there's a lot of these online. I mean, we actually partner with a company called Crowdflower that's great for this, but it's like an enterprise kind of company that actually works mostly with kind of like the Amazons of the world and so on to look at pictures of stuff that consumers are posting online to verify that a dishwasher actually is a dishwasher, and if somebody's trying to like sell a pair of shoes on eBay, that it's actually not been mistagged as a record, something like that. So we actually use it a lot for like image recognition and so on as well. But but basically what it does is you kind of push these basic tasks out to the crowd that software is very bad at doing. So essentially what people do is that they'll kind of like tag an image for you as being a certain gender or ethnicity or age for fraction of a penny. Some of these people actually are trying to like get virtual currency. So they might be playing like an online video game that is sort of like pay to play, and they might want to get like extra hit points or something, and they're willing to actually, they kind of devalue their time, so they're like they'll work for an hour or 2 hours to get what's the equivalent of like $3 or $4 worth of virtual currency. It's very odd, but it's really effective. So we generally find if we push out like 100,000 pictures of people, we can usually have all those categorized within a couple of hours.
My gosh.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Truly incredible. Okay, so these are essentially like research panels. I mean, or as we would
that we're creating?
marker research panels.
We
Yeah.
think of them that way, yeah. And they're not panels in the sense that we can go and survey them, but they provide a lot of the same kind of insights you would get from a traditional panel, we think. And we've done some testing. We actually have clients where we've actually kind of looked at the insights, the kind of like perceptions and attitudes that a panel they've created have and compared it to these custom panels in social. And, I would say kind of like what you typically see in studies that are comparing social media with polls for like, for politics. The exact percentages don't always align, but they're directionally always the same. You always come to the same kind of insight or aha. It's with social, it's just a lot cheaper and faster.
Very good. Very interesting. Katie, other questions from there?
Yes, we have one other question from Paige Donnelly. How can I find relevant small data on Facebook? E.g., do I have to have a paid social media tool to get the clean data needed for small data analysis? Or will any of the freebies out there currently work for this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Twitter is obviously the easy one to go with because all the data is public and their API is really open. With Facebook, there's a couple of ways to go about it. If you actually have, if you're, I don't know if you're client side or agency side, but if you have access to a CRM database and if you have email addresses, you can essentially put those email addresses into Facebook, and you can get the social pages. And if they have public data, you can scrape that using the Facebook Open Graph API. If you want to find a specific professional audience on Facebook, it's a lot more challenging. You can't really search people's bios on Facebook. It ends up being a very manual exercise. That's been my experience. The other thing is if you're looking for like super fans on your page, there are a few companies out there like the Spread Fast and the Sprinklers of the world that will tell you like who are the most influential people on my Facebook page. And you can essentially get a list of people that engage with you a lot if you are kind of looking for like advocates or something like that.
Very good. Seth, we talked a lot. Oh,
no, go ahead.
Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I've got one more question from Helena Dobbins. Are there certain social data points that you focus on to make correlations for your insights?
That's a good question. Let's see. Yes, I guess there are certain social media data points or kind of KPIs or metrics that we use, fairly consistently. The value of those KPIs really vary quite a bit from vertical to vertical and client to client type. So the kind of metrics we would use for a corporate communications team that's in the automotive space is going to look very different than the types of metrics we're looking at for like a brand team that's in the beverages space. But I can talk a little bit. A lot of these are ones that people have been analyzing for a long time. All the engagement metrics certainly. A lot of the marketing metrics like click-throughs, number of inbound links to content. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of these KPIs. I will talk about one that actually I'll talk about the one I'm really interested in right now. One of the things that we've actually started to find is that volumetric counts of mentions online aren't always as correlated to business outcomes and events that happen in the real world as much as other measures like homogeneity in conversation. So if you kind of think about the analogy I like to use is like a stadium. So when you have a big stadium, like a big football stadium, when you have like 30, 40,000 people in it, during like halftime and during parts of the game when nothing interesting is happening, everybody in the stadium is having a different conversation. They're not speaking the same cadence. They're all kind of like talking to the person next to them. And essentially, in that stadium, what you hear is white noise. You just hear chatter. And there's not a lot of signal in that noise. But during really key parts of the game, the conversations become very homogeneous. People start to chant things like defense. They might start chanting a specific player's name because something very important is happening. And we have some statistical measures where we kind of look at, as opposed to just looking at volume, we look at how consistent is the language that a bunch of handles or a bunch of social properties are using at the same time. And we generally find that, yeah, that is correlated with volume to some degree, but sometimes it isn't. And what we generally see is that when you see very homogeneous conversations appear within a panel or within a set of Twitter handles or Facebook pages or blog posts at a specific point in time, depending on what you're trying to look at, it either precedes or proceeds a big event. We've actually been able to we've been able to forecast the occurrence of protests in some cases. We've been able to forecast the occurrence of customer kind of driven customer-driven campaigns, both for and against companies based on that kind of homogeneity, and you don't see that with volume. So, yeah, I'll use that one as an example of one of the more interesting ones that we've been looking into lately.
You know what, it's 3 minutes until we need to conclude, but last question for you, Seth. How does a practitioner today go about educating themselves? I mean, we primarily talked about identifying audiences and measuring those. We didn't talk quite as much about analyzing campaigns or the old CYA metrics that PR has become so famous for. But how does a practitioner, maybe a young person or even an older person, begin to school themselves in this whole area of small data, of social analytics? The conferences that offer, one-day conferences with, 10-minute speaking slots to each person, those are very difficult to learn much from. So I guess I'm looking for something more structured, if it exists.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't seen anything that's that structured around this type of analysis. I mean, so W2O has, trying to think, so we actually have a program we sponsor at Syracuse called the Center for Social Commerce. And some of this type of thinking is actually taught there at an undergraduate and graduate level. We've been talking a little bit to the Annenberg School about trying to do some courses there as well. That's the close like a formal kind of way about how to think about applying kind of market research discipline to the kind of metrics and data that comms and marketing folks are now exposed to through social and digital. I would say if you're a practitioner, regardless of what phase in your career you're at, I would say take a multidisciplinary approach. I mean, kind of try to get yourself exposed to, either through conferences or through friends or colleagues, to the consumer insights and the market research teams on the client side, and look at the kind of research that they're actually commissioning and using. That was really valuable for me. When I finally started to kind of see the kind of stuff that companies like Nielsen or Cantor, GfK were providing to clients from a market research and a panel-based perspective, I was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff here that you probably get from social data in a really interesting way. So, I would say, getting a little bit out of your comfort zone is really helpful. I mean, also, if you are in communications, look at the kind of metrics and measures that your colleagues in digital marketing are using. They're very different, and again, I think at this stage most people kind of know what web analytics platforms are, but actually kind of looking at the reports they get around kind of the path analysis that they look at, the way that they analyze consumers' navigations through their site and from earned media and from paid media is really valuable. Just get yourself exposed to as much kind of data and research methodologies across the organization as possible, everything from the digital and social stuff to the market research stuff. And I think you'll start to see that there's these connections there that maybe you'd never realized were there, or it might kind of spark some ideas about how to analyze the data you have in a completely different way. That's my best recommendation. I know it's not formal, but I think I think ultimately there's a lot of self-education that's required.
Well, that's excellent, and I'm sure you would probably tell us to take at least one statistics course as well to catch up a little bit on that part of it. Yes? No?
Yeah, I would. I mean, yeah, I would. Either that or make really good friends with a statistician. That's almost as valuable. Yeah.
Probably a better idea. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Seth, thank you so much for this fascinating presentation. Thank you to our attendees for joining us today, and to Katie Eichhoff for organizing it. I'm sure that we will feature Seth Duncan again if he will agree to teach us more in the future. Thanks again from Karma and Salience Insight. We are basically global organizations. We're one organization now, offering public relations and social media analysis globally in over 30 countries. So thank you and good night.
Yeah, thank you.